Welcome back, everyone. It is Sunday sit-down time. Joining me tonight, KTGR's Andy Humphrey. Andy, 1 week ago today, we had a big Chiefs win. What'd you think of that game? You get a chance to watch it?
Pretty exciting, yeah, for sure. I mean, I married into a Chiefs family, and so everybody was happy around the house. So if everyone else is happy, then I'm happy. So it was a good game to watch.
Who's your MVP if you had to pick other than Patrick Mahomes?
I mean, other than Patrick Mahomes, probably Nick Bolton.
Nick
honestly.
Bolton, our boy.
Seriously, even without the second touchdown that ended up being overturned, with how he was stopping the run on all those tackles he made, and of course the touchdown that he did have. You know, he had one of his best games ever, and it's not a bad place to have it happen in the Super Bowl.
Who would have thought that Mizzou's first touchdown in a Super Bowl would come on a defensive side of the ball?
Sometimes it happens that way.
You never know,
yeah,
right?
For sure.
Well, switching gears a little bit back here to Columbia, obviously, you know, men's team coming off a couple losses here. You know, what have you seen from these two losses and kind of what's been going on here lately?
Yeah, this is where I have to apologize, Natalie, because you brought me on this show assuming that I would give you better analysis than Mizzou just needs to put the ball in the basket a little bit more often than their opponents, but it's kind of that simple, you know, with a team that is as talented offensively as Mizzou has been this year. They've shown us time and again how they can light up the scoreboard, how they can shoot, you know, 40, sometimes even 50% from three, especially in big games like we saw at Tennessee. That becomes a thing that you have to expect to happen more often than not. And when it doesn't against, you know, teams like Auburn and Texas A&M, then you start to wonder, well, is this team okay? Because the reality is they have to hit something like 40% from three most nights in order to be successful against some of those top teams. They just don't have the defensive abilities to overcome rough shooting nights, and you saw that against Texas A&M. A&M's not going to light up the scoreboard all the time, but they have really good defensive abilities, and so Mizzou's not really geared to win rock fights like that. They can't win 65-60. They have to make sure they at least get to 70 or more to be able to win games most times if they're playing somebody that's worth a damn in the SEC.
Do you think it's a size thing? What do you think is the biggest issue that they're running into here?
I mean, some of that. You don't have as much ability to get offensive rebounds as other teams do, and then on the other side, you give up a whole lot more possessions because other teams have an ability to rise up and rebound a little bit better. Now, it's something that Mizzou has been able to overcome at times by making sure that they turn over their opponents, but like you saw against Texas A&M, because the Aggies had some early turnovers in that first half. Yeah, for sure. And Mizzou didn't punish those didn't punish those mistakes as much as they should have. So when they don't end up getting points off turnovers, getting on the fast break and actually converting on those chances, then they have to rely upon their half-court offense. And when you have rough shooting nights, it's hard to score in the half-court.
Obviously, just how much Kobe Brown, how much do you feel like he can realistically carry this team? He can only do so much, you know, as one player, but obviously you saw him had a big game against Texas A&M, but still, you know, not enough there.
Right, yeah, he has to be there more often than not. He has to be the focal point of the offense for this team. But as we have seen in some of the bigger wins that Mizzou has had this year, we've seen other players step up. We've seen Demoy Hodge. We've seen DeAndre Golson, Nick Honor, Sean East, whoever it is. You can't seem to predict who it is every single night, but the one constant does have to be Kobe Brown, and then you need one or two guys to make sure that they fill in the blanks when Mizzou's offense is getting a little bit stagnant and they can't find Kobe Brown, or if he's on the bench for foul trouble. So, again, it's going to be an interesting thing that Dennis Gates has to now come up with in these final four games to make sure that they're not dropping some of these next ones down the stretch. Because here's the thing, Mizzou, if the tournament started today, they're a tournament team. I would think they would be in. Problem is, it doesn't start today, and you've got 4 games left in the regular season that if you Mississippi State's going to be a tough one coming up, but the other 3 you would consider to be in the bad loss category, and you can't afford those when you're in Mizzou's position right now.
Well, I was just going to ask you, do you feel like if they win out, this is a tournament team, obviously, but, you know, do you feel like they have to win out in order to be a tournament team here?
Maybe not have to, but if you want to feel safe before the SEC tournament, I do think 4 wins here down the stretch is going to be required. Because, again, you've got teams like LSU and Ole Miss coming up to end the season, and then you're at Georgia. Those are all not teams that can expect to be having their name called on Selection Sunday. So it's it's games that you have to win even though they're on the road. And then Mississippi State is one of those bubble teams that's coming to Columbia here on Tuesday. So that's the most 50-50 game of the bunch. But Mizzou's going to be favored in pretty much every single one of these games coming up. And again, you're in the business of avoiding the bad losses, because any one of those losses against LSU or Ole Miss, if they were to happen, would end up being the worst loss on Mizzou's resume so far.
Mizzou's been pretty good, obviously, at home this season, if you exclude that Texas A&M game. You know, what do you think it is on the road? What's the biggest thing you've seen on the road that maybe switches for them? Is this sort of switch, it seems like, that flips?
I mean, sometimes you see some of those bad shooting nights on the road. You've seen them a little more often when they're away from Mizzou Arena. Now, there have been exceptions. They went to Ole Miss, did very well, and, of course, against Tennessee, where they needed to shoot just about as well as they did to get that victory. But, you know, sometimes it's just comfortability. When you come into a new arena, you try to get acclimated to it. You're just coming off a long travel day. It can be a little bit harder to refocus and make sure that you're shooting the same way that you did if you were sleeping in your own bed and practicing in your own gym. So it's just those little things that can be psychological at times. It's not going to explain every reason why they can't get it done on the road, but sometimes that plays a little bit into it. And I think this team, which relies so much upon its jump shooting, sometimes they fall victim to that on the road.
Well, switching gears a little bit to the women's team, obviously the tournament coming further and further out of focus, it feels like, you know, as the weeks go on here. What do you think's been going on recently? It's been obviously a little bit of a rough stretch for them. Got a much-needed win, though, obviously, just a few days ago.
Yeah, kind of making sure that they at least have that door somewhat open for them to possibly make a run. But, yeah, this team's going to have to win out and probably might need to make a huge run in the SEC tournament, if not win it, in order to be considered for that. You know, it's been interesting. You know, you've seen some players step up, of course, like Haley Frank and Lauren Hansen, but you kind of expect that. But you do need the supporting cast to do the same. And they also have had a bit of a scoring problem at times. Not as much as maybe the men's team has had consistently, but yeah, with Robin Pinchton's group, it seems that, you know, they haven't been able to get that consistent offense from players not named Hansen or Frank, and it's been coming back to bite them against some of these opponents that you would expect a team like Mizzou to be able to take care of business against, but just have not been able to take advantage of those chances to get quality wins when they've been presented to them.
Obviously, me and you were talking before, it kind of feels worse than I feel like it is right now for the Mizzou women's team. You obviously have a lot of hope in girls like Ashton Judd, your local kid Avery Kroenke here. How much, you know, potential do you feel like this young talent really has for this team?
Well, I think a good bunch. It's definitely an interesting class that Robin Pinchton brought in, and I think another year under their belts, they get another chance to come back next year and build upon what they're trying to do at Mizzou. It's going to be really interesting to see how that team gels with, again, you're going to have Haley Frank and Lauren Hansen coming back. Those are your top two scorers. I would only expect the play to be elevated just a little bit next year. So I think that's something to consider when you're talking about what this team will look like coming into the next season.
Well, obviously, we still have this season to worry about. It's crazy that the SEC tournament's already almost here.
I know.
Okay,
Check your calendars real quick.
Baseball season will be here before you know it.
Yeah.
Back here in Columbia. Well, I appreciate you coming on tonight, Andy.
Thanks so much.
Awesome. Thanks. For the rest of you guys, we'll be right back after the break.